I moved to Willow Creek for the quiet life. After years of climbing the corporate ladder in commercial real estate development, I was ready for something peaceful. The small mountain town seemed perfect, surrounded by pine forests and genuine people who value privacy and community in equal measure. I bought a charming craftsman house on Maple Street with cash, planning to work remotely while enjoying the slower pace. What I didn't know was that my next-door neighbor, Karen Blackwood, was about to make my life very complicated. Karen was in her mid-40s, always dressed in flowing purple scarves and crystal jewelry that clinked when she walked. She called herself a spiritual practitioner and ran what she described as a sacred wellness studio out of her garage. Crystals lined her windows, and the scent of burning sage constantly drifted from her property. I had nothing against alternative spirituality, but Karen took things to an entirely different level. She didn't just practice witchcraft. She weaponized it. The problem started 2 weeks after I moved in. I was unloading groceries when Karen appeared at the property line, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "You need to move your car," she announced without preamble. "The energy flow from the eastern quadrant is being disrupted. My morning rituals require unobstructed cosmic alignment, and your vehicle is creating a blockage in the ley lines. Before you go any further, do me a favor. If you're enjoying this story of cosmic karma coming full circle, hit that like button and subscribe to Karen Eat World. Trust me, you'll want to see where this is going. Your support helps us bring you more stories of entitled people getting exactly what they deserve. Now, back to Karen and her ley lines. I politely explained that I was parked in my own driveway, on my own property. Karen's face darkened. "You clearly don't understand the spiritual consequences of your ignorance. But you will learn." She turned and swept back to her house, crystals jangling ominously. Over the following days, things escalated. Karen left, cleansing bundles, on my doorstep, which were essentially sage wrapped in red string. She burned incense at all hours, creating clouds of smoke that drifted into my windows. When I mentioned the smoke was triggering my allergies, she informed me that I was rejecting the universe's attempt to purify my corrupted aura. Then came the curse. I arrived home one evening to find Karen standing in my front yard, arms raised to the sky, chanting in what I assumed was supposed to be Latin, but sounded more like badly pronounced Spanish mixed with fantasy novel dialogue. Candles formed a circle around her, and she held what appeared to be a doll with a photograph of my face taped to it. My actual face, which meant she'd somehow obtained a photo of me, probably from the neighborhood social media page. "By the power of the Ancient Ones, I call forth misfortune upon this man," she declared loudly enough for the entire street to hear. "May his water run cold, his bread grow mold, his luck turn old, as I have foretold." I stood there, grocery bags still in hand, genuinely speechless. Karen opened her eyes, saw me watching, and smiled with absolute confidence. "You've been warned. The universe has heard my petition. Your destruction begins now." "Karen, you're in my yard," I said calmly. "Please leave." "You can't stop what's already in motion," she replied cryptically, gathering her candles. "The curse is cast. 3 days. Watch what happens in 3 days." I called the police non-emergency line. The dispatcher tried very hard not to laugh, but ultimately explained that unless Karen was threatening violence or causing property damage, there wasn't much they could do about someone chanting in my yard. They suggested I document everything and consider a restraining order if it continued. 3 days later, right on schedule, my hot water heater died. I'm a rational person. I know hot water heaters fail, especially in older houses. But Karen didn't see it that way. She appeared at my door that evening, practically glowing with vindication. "The curse is working," she announced. "The universe has spoken through me. This is only the beginning. Unless you acknowledge my power and make amends, more will come." My water heater was 20 years old, I replied. It was due to fail anyway. Keep telling yourself that, Karen said, eyes gleaming. Next comes financial disruption. I've already performed the ritual. 7 days. She was insane, but in a way that made her dangerous. Not because I believed in curses, but because I realized she was actively trying to sabotage my life and framing it as supernatural intervention. I started documenting everything. Photos, videos, timestamps. Karen's behavior grew more bizarre. She began leaving hex bags on my property, small cloth pouches filled with dirt, dead insects, and written curses. She painted symbols on the sidewalk in front of my house, using what I desperately hoped was red paint, and not something biological. She told neighbors I was spiritually dangerous and that they should avoid me. The financial disruption came, but not the way Karen expected. A week after her second curse, I received notification that a zoning complaint had been filed against my property, claiming I was running an illegal business from my home. The complaint was anonymous, but I knew exactly who had filed it. The town would need to investigate, which meant inspectors, paperwork, and hassle. Karen was using bureaucracy as her weapon, dressing it up as magical consequences. That's when I decided enough was enough. Karen thought she was dealing with an ordinary person she could bully with theatrical mysticism and small-town administrative warfare. She had no idea who I actually was or what resources I had available. I spent my career in commercial real estate development, specializing in property acquisition and zoning law. I'd negotiated deals worth tens of millions of dollars and had a network of attorneys, contractors, and local government contacts across 3 states. I'd been enjoying retirement, but Karen had just reminded me why I was so good at my job. I didn't get angry. I got strategic. First, I needed information. I requested public records on Karen's property. What I discovered was fascinating. Her Sacred Wellness Studio had never received proper permits. She was operating a commercial business in a residentially zoned area without approval. She'd been doing tarot readings, selling crystals, and hosting ritual ceremonies for paying clients, all without the required business license or commercial zoning variants. More interesting was her property's history. Karen rented the house. She didn't own it. The owner was an elderly man named Harold Chin, who lived in Arizona and had inherited the property from his late sister. According to county records, Harold had been trying to sell the property for 2 years, but Karen's tenancy and the local market conditions had made it difficult. I called Harold. We had a very pleasant conversation. I explained that I was interested in purchasing investment properties in Willow Creek and had noticed his listing had been sitting for quite some time. Harold was frustrated. Karen paid her rent on time, but had been a nightmare tenant in other ways, and her commercial activities had generated complaints he had to deal with from afar. He wanted out but couldn't sell with an active tenant. I made Harold an offer. I would purchase his property for 15% above asking price, all cash, with a closing in 30 days. In exchange, Harold would provide Karen with proper notice of the sale and inform her that the new owner would not be renewing her lease. Everything completely legal, completely standard for a property transaction. Harold accepted immediately. But I wasn't done. Karen had filed a false zoning complaint against me. Turnabout seemed fair. I contacted the county planning department and filed a formal complaint against Karen's address, complete with documentation. Photographs of her business signage in the window. Screenshots of her social media posts advertising spiritual services. Copies of her posts in local community groups promoting her studio and listing prices. Testimonials from neighbors about the steady stream of clients visiting her property. The county took zoning violations seriously, especially unreported commercial activity in residential neighborhoods. Within a week, an inspector visited Karen's property. She received official notice that she was operating an illegal business and had 30 days to cease all commercial activities or face daily fines of $500. Karen, predictably, lost her mind. She appeared at my door furious, accusing me of sending dark energy to corrupt the authorities. I calmly informed her that I had simply reported factual information to the appropriate department. If she had problems with the zoning laws, she should take it up with the county. "You think you've won," she hissed. "I will make you suffer for this. I'm casting a binding spell tonight. You'll never know peace in this town." "Looking forward to it," I replied and closed the door. That night, Karen performed her most elaborate ritual yet. I watched from my window as she drew a massive circle in her backyard with salt, lit dozens of candles, and chanted for over an hour. She burned papers covered in writing, scattered herbs, and at one point appeared to be shouting at the sky while holding my photograph over a flame. The next morning, she received 2 pieces of mail. One was the formal notice from Harold Chin that her property had been sold and her lease would not be renewed. She had 60 days to vacate. The other was a follow-up notice from the county planning department, informing her that her business activities had been confirmed and she was now subject to daily fines until she achieved compliance. I watched from my porch as Karen opened the letters. Her face went from confused to pale to bright red in the span of seconds. She looked up at my house, and our eyes met across the yard. Then she did exactly what I expected. She marched over, letters clutched in shaking hands, and began screaming about how I'd manifested dark magic against her and perverted the natural order with my toxic masculine energy. Several neighbors came out to watch. "This is all your fault," she shrieked. "You've cursed me. You've turned the universe against me." "I bought a house, Karen," I said calmly, "and I reported zoning violations. No magic required. Just money and paperwork." Her eyes went wide. You bought Harold's house?" "I did. Closed yesterday. I'm now your landlord. And per the terms of the sale, I'm not renewing your lease. You have 60 days to find a new place for yourself and your spiritual practice. I'd suggest somewhere with proper commercial zoning." Karen actually staggered backward, as if I'd physically struck her. "You can't do this. I've lived here for 4 years. I have rights. You have exactly the rights outlined in your lease agreement, which includes a standard non-renewal clause. I've done nothing illegal or even unusual. People buy rental properties all the time. The fact that you've been harassing your neighbor for weeks and operating an illegal business just made this property a particularly attractive investment." "I'll sue you," she sputtered. I'll curse your entire bloodline." "Feel free to do either, though I'd recommend focusing on finding a new place to live. The rental market is pretty tight this time of year. Also, those county fines. They start accruing tomorrow. That's $500 a day until you shut down your business operations. I'd get on that quickly if I were you." The color drained from Karen's face as she did the math. Even a few weeks of fines would cost her thousands of dollars. She couldn't afford to fight both the eviction and the zoning violations. She'd used all her weapons, wasted all her energy on theatrical curses and supernatural threats, while I'd simply used the system she tried to weaponize against me. But the final piece of my revenge was still coming, and it was perfectly legal, completely justified, and absolutely devastating. 2 days later, I filed an application with the county to convert Karen's rental house, which I now owned, into a licensed commercial wellness space. The property was large enough, and with the right permits and modifications, it could legally operate as exactly the kind of business Karen had been running illegally. My application included architectural plans, parking assessments, and a comprehensive business proposal. The twist? My plan was to lease the renovated space to a competing spiritual practitioner at a very reasonable rate, someone who would do everything by the book. I'd already found the perfect tenant through my business network, a licensed therapist, who also offered meditation and wellness services. She was thrilled at the opportunity and had all the proper credentials and permits. I personally delivered a courtesy notice to Karen, informing her of my plans for the property after her departure. I wanted her to understand that not only was she being evicted, but her former home would become the legitimate, legal version of everything she tried to do, run by someone who actually followed the rules. Karen opened the door, saw the document, and her hands began to shake as she read it. I watched her face cycle through emotions: confusion, disbelief, rage, and finally crushing defeat. The realization hit her all at once. She tried to curse me, harass me, bureaucratically sabotage me, all while being fundamentally vulnerable in ways she'd never considered. She'd been so focused on her imaginary power that she'd ignored the very real legal and financial weaknesses in her own position. "You can't," she whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice anymore. This was supposed to be my sanctuary, my sacred space. "It's a rental property in a residential zone," I corrected. "And soon it'll be a properly licensed commercial wellness center, generating legitimate tax revenue for the community. Everything you wanted to do, but legally." Her eyes met mine, and in that moment, I saw complete comprehension. She'd spent weeks trying to manifest misfortune for me through rituals and curses, filing false reports, creating chaos. And in response, I'd simply written a check, made a few phone calls, and used the exact same bureaucratic system she tried to weaponize. No magic, no mysticism, just money, knowledge, and the willingness to play the long game. Karen's face crumpled. The powerful witch who'd promised to destroy me through cosmic forces was just a woman who'd forgotten the most basic rule: real power doesn't come from crystals and chance. It comes from understanding systems and having the resources to use them. "How?" she finally asked, voice breaking. "How did you do this?" I smiled. "You cursed the wrong neighbor, Karen. You assumed I was powerless because I was new, because I seemed quiet and unassuming. You never thought to ask what I did before I moved here, what connections I had, what I was actually capable of. You were so certain your rituals gave you power that you forgot to protect yourself in the real world." She stood there, frozen, as the full scope of her situation crashed over her. Evicted, fined, watching her life's work become someone else's legitimate business, all because she decided to wage spiritual warfare against someone who specialized in real estate acquisition and zoning law. The irony was almost poetic. "The universe works in mysterious ways," I added softly. "Sometimes karma doesn't need spells and candles. Sometimes it just needs a good attorney and a cash offer above asking price." Karen's mouth opened and closed silently. For the first time since I'd met her, she had absolutely nothing to say. No threats, no curses, no mystical proclamations. Just the dawning horror of understanding that she'd played a game she was never equipped to win, against an opponent who'd been playing on an entirely different level the whole time. If you made it to the end of this story of cursed karma, you already know what to do. Smash that like button, subscribe to Karen Eat World, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another tale of entitled people facing the consequences of their actions. Share this with someone who needs to hear about the most spectacular backfire in witchcraft history. Thanks for watching, and remember, the best revenge is always completely legal.